Hey, what's up guys? My name is Irina and welcome to my channel where I review everything tech. As you know, the iPhone XS and iPhone XS Max have just been released by Apple, and I know that many of you are sitting on the sidelines right now wondering whether or not to upgrade to the new and undoubtedly expensive models or score a great deal by getting one of the last year's iPhones. And I know that at the end of the day many of you will make decisions based on the camera quality and performance. In this video I will compare the camera of the iPhone 8 Plus with the iPhone XS Max. A whopping $400 separates these two phones, and I was super curious to see whether or not the XS Max camera really justifies paying the premium. Spoiler alert, the iPhone XS Max camera is better, but stay tuned till the end to see for yourself whether or not the actual difference between these two cameras is worth paying more. Without being too boring, let's quickly take a look at the camera specs of these two phones. They both have dual 12-megapixel wide-angle and telephoto cameras with the equal aperture of 1.8 on the wide-angle lens, and the XS Max has a slight advantage of having a larger aperture of 2.4 compared to the 8 Plus's aperture of 2.8 on the telephoto lens. Also, it's important to note that the XS Max benefits from having a dual optical image stabilization, whereas the 8 Plus only has its wide-angle camera optically stabilized. And when it comes to selfie cameras, we have 7 megapixels with an aperture of 2.2 on both devices. Also, keep in mind that the XS Max has the selfie portrait mode, which I will not be comparing here since the 8 Plus doesn't have one. First things first, let's start with the easy stuff. Sunny day, blue skies, and plenty of light. I decided to start with the portrait mode comparison. On paper, the iPhone XS Max portraits promise to give us more accurate object separation from the background, and as you can see from these two portraits, both phones did pretty well. My hair is nicely separated from the background, and there is nothing that catches my eye as an obvious flaw. However, the XS Max did much better when it comes to exposure. Despite the fact that the sun was shining from the back, I came out perfectly exposed, with the camera retaining crucial details and colors of my skin, t-shirt and shorts. I would still call the portrait from the 8 Plus usable, but I would definitely need to retouch it later. And to make the portrait test more challenging, I decided to stand in front of the wire mesh. If we look at the overall exposure once again, we could see that the XS Max did a good job, especially when you look how evenly my face is exposed. And when it comes to the 8 Plus, we could see that my forehead for some reason appears to be much darker than the rest of my face. Also, when it comes to the obvious flaws, you could see that the camera failed to blur a big chunk of background next to my flying hair. And switching to the XS Max, the separation is not perfect, but it's noticeably better. And to make this test even more fun, I decided to test the portrait modes in low light conditions, 10 minutes before sunset. Once again, no surprises here, the XS Max does it better on the exposure. However, what really stands out is how well the XS Max is able to preserve the details of the sky behind me, while the 8 Plus made the entire sky look wide and overexposed. And we see the same story in the following portraits. Shifting gears to the main camera, I wanted to first see how these two phones compare when it comes to pretty common and unchallenging scenarios. You will see that the sand on the 8 Plus appears to be warmer, and at the same time it has way more contrast than the XS Max. And when you look at the sky, you will note that it appears as a nice even shade of blue on the XS Max, while the 8 Plus gives us a darker sky with noticeable ridges. When trying to get a close-up of some flowers, I think both phones did a pretty good job, but you will notice that the 8 Plus has darker shadows and slightly more saturation. When it comes to the selfie cameras, the XS Max gives you a more natural look, with softer skin tones and background. In fact, if you zoom in closer, you will see how the XS Max by default is working to smooth out all the skin imperfections, whereas the 8 Plus makes the selfie more saturated and makes my skin look red. And now let's go back to the main cameras and see how they perform under the extremely challenging light conditions. In this scene, the sun is already gone, and we have the artificial light beaming right in front of us. I decided to snap two pictures without touching the screen to manually adjust my focus point, and let's see the results. The most striking difference comes when looking at the sky. The 8 Plus's camera shows us this completely white, blown-out sky, while the XS Max truly shines here, since its camera was able to correctly preserve the colors and details of the sky. Also, we can see that the lamp reflection on the wall appears much warmer on the XS Max, where we can still see the wall's texture, whereas the 8 Plus's camera has overexposed this area to the point where we have actually lost some of the wall's details. However, to be honest, I must say that I do prefer how the bricks came out on the 8 Plus's camera, since they do seem to have more pronounced contrast. And I found the same story in the next scene, where the sky is once again blown out on the 8 Plus and the lamp reflections on the wall appear lighter. Moving on to the next scene. Here, once again, the XS Max has managed to preserve the details of the sky. However, perhaps you'll find the most striking difference when looking at how this light bulb came out. You can clearly see the coil on the photo coming from the XS Max, whereas the 8 Plus shows the inside of the bulb as a plain white spot. In the following scene, the photos appear almost identical, and at a first glance it's hard to say which one is best. But if you look closer, you will see that the XS Max shows us more details of the carousel, while the 8 Plus repeats the pattern from the previous photo, giving us less details and making the inside of the carousel appear overexposed. Now let's switch gears and talk about how these two cameras make videos. In this first scene we have cloudy skies and I'm simply walking down the street. As you can see, the XS Max does a better job showing the clouds, and overall the image appears to be more vivid. Speaking of the image stabilization, I shot these videos side by side in 4K and I personally don't see much difference, so you'll have to judge them for yourself. We see the same story in the next scene where the colors appear more saturated and the sky looks more dramatic on the XS Max. And here I compare the video quality from the telephoto lenses of these two phones. At a first glance the videos might look similar, but if you look closer you will see that the skyline of Manhattan appears sharper on the XS Max. And I also like the colors of the water better here. And just in case you were curious, here is the sound and video from the selfie camera of the XS Max. And now I'm switching to the selfie camera of the 8 Plus, and you can judge the quality for yourself. I did not expect to see much difference, but I decided to compare the slow motion modes of these two cameras anyway. As you can see, both of them captured my graceful jump quite well. However, the XS Max has made the sky and the grass look more vivid. And when comparing overall quality, I don't see any noticeable difference here. Okay guys, after running all these tests, I'm back to the question which I raised in the beginning of this video. As you can see for yourself, the camera on the XS Max pretty much crushes the one on the 8 Plus. So the real question becomes, are you willing to pay more for a better camera? At the end of the day, this decision will come down to your specific needs and budget. I still think that the 8 Plus has an amazing camera, which will be more than enough for most users. However, if you ask me, the improvements of the camera on the XS Max are significant enough to leave me feeling justified to spend more money for an upgrade. Let me know what you guys think and hit me up on the comments below.